Hi, my name's Jennifer and welcome back to my channel. If you watched my last video, which was my quarterly reading check-in, you will know that I've DNF'd 21 books so far this year, which works out at a DNF rate of 35%. So I thought I'd do a video talking about all the books I've DNF'd this year so far and why I've DNF'd them. For some of them, I probably might not remember that much about why I DNF'd them, but for some I do remember more. I would be interested to know what your DNF rate is, because as I mentioned in my last video, I've never logged that before. So I find it quite interesting. I think I seem to DNF a lot more books than most people do that I see on BookTube. So I don't know what that's about. I feel like it makes me sound really flaky. I don't think I'm that flaky. And I also think it makes it seem like I don't know my own reading taste, but I think I do. I think I could choose more books that I know I'm going to like and stick to more safe choices. But saying that, some of the books on this list, well, I think there's 3 in particular on this list, which I'm quite surprised that I DNF'd. So that means it's not necessarily a case of just picking safer choices. I don't know. I think it's quite interesting. Anyway, fortunately, I think these are all library books. Most of my reading is library books, so it doesn't matter that I've DNF'd them. I've not wasted money. So the first book that I DNF'd this year was I Love Charlotte Bronte by Michelle Daly. This I read for my reading group. And interestingly, I actually picked this book, but the reason I picked it was because I thought the group would like it rather than that I thought I would like it. I didn't think I would like it, and I was right, I didn't. And the group did, for the most part, really like it. I thought it was one of the worst written books I've ever read. Then I DNF'd Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This was one of the classics that I wanted to head to this year, having never read any Virginia Woolf. Mrs. Dalloway, from what I can remember, I didn't read that far into it, and it is quite a short book, I think, as well, but I think I found Mrs. Dalloway strangely boring, but also confusing. Then I DNF'd The Last Place You Look by Kristen Lepionka, which is a crime thriller. I can't really remember much about it. I probably just wasn't feeling it. Then Alice, if you are watching, you might want to block your ears, because I DNF'd Bookworm by Lucy Mangan, which is a memoir of childhood reading. The reason I DNF'd that one is because I didn't like the voice or the humour. It really, really grated on me. So I didn't read very far and I DNF'd. Sorry. Then The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. Janice Hallett wrote The Appeal, which I read and enjoyed last year. I read maybe almost half of The Twyford Code, and I just thought, I don't know, I just wasn't that interested. It was the premise was kind of intriguing, but not enough to keep me wanting to read to the end, basically. Then I read a book called, I DNF'd a book called The Anatomy of Murder, and this was a sort of like a compilation from the, the Detection Club, which was a club I think formed in the 1930s, and included people like the Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers and so on. And the Anatomy of Murder is a number of those authors in that group, each taking a true crime case and writing a story about it, and I just struggled to get into it. Next is another reading group book, and it's called Whispering Shadows by Jan-Philipp Sendker. I think this was translated from German, and it's set somewhere in Eastern Asia, and we follow this guy who is, I don't know if he's German or if he's American, and it's sort of a bit of an actiony thriller with a bit of politics thrown in. I read about 3/4 of that. I tend to, when it's a book for my reading group, although we say like it's fine to DNF, I tend to try harder than I would otherwise to get through those books. But I just couldn't make myself finish that one. There was only one of the group who actually made it to the end of that book. Then I DNF'd to Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara. I read about half. The reason I DNF'd this one is because I just felt it was quite info dumpy. Even though it's a really long book, it's really like 3 books smushed into one, which doesn't give that much space for you to naturally come to understand the world that we're introduced to, and it felt too info dumpy for me. Next, The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I don't think I've read anything by Grady Hendrix before. I mean, this was kind of okay. Like, I didn't hate it. I didn't read that much of it. Probably less than 100 pages. It's sort of like a horror thriller, but I just wasn't that interested. And I have since heard somewhere that I think that book was one that had originally been rejected by publishers, and then when Grady Hendrix became popular with whatever other books, they then published that one. Maybe that's why it wasn't that good. Next is a crime novel from the Brian and May series. It's called White Corridor. I've read a couple of that series before and quite like them, but for some reason I didn't read very much of this at all. I just wasn't feeling it. Okay, next, it's a long list. Next is a short story collection called People from My Neighbourhood by Hiromi Kawakami. So it's translated from Japanese. It's a very, very short story collection. Super short. I read a few of the stories, which are only like 1 or 2 pages long each. And I just didn't get it. It was sort of like, well, as the title would suggest, following different people from the neighbourhood. But with only like a page each. I don't know, I just didn't get it. Next one that might be a little bit surprising is Matrix by Lauren Groff. I really liked the idea of this. I didn't read, how much did I read? Probably less than 100 pages. It's historical fiction, but it reads like an historical account, and for that reason I felt like there was a distance between like the reader and the story, presumably intentional, I think, because that's how it's written, but I just struggled to connect with it. Next is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. This I picked up because I was anticipating it being on the Women's Prize long list, but it wasn't. Let me tell you about my history with Sally Rooney. I read Conversations with Friends years ago and loved it and gave it 5 stars. Then when Normal People came out, I picked it up from the library and DNF'd it pretty early on, actually. I just really didn't like it. And the same happened with Beautiful World, Where Are You? So it's weird that, isn't it, that I really love Conversation with Friends, but I've DNF'd the other 2 books. There you go. Next is a relatively new release. It's The Anomaly by Herve Tellier. I want to say this is translated from French. It's a thriller. I didn't read that much. Interesting premise. So I think it's like a plane crash. But then somehow everyone on board then gets this doppelganger. I don't know. The reason I DNF'd it was because you're introduced to a lot of different characters, and so you get a few pages from this character and then this one, and they're all separate, and I just wasn't interested. Next, okay, this book is the one I'm most surprised that I DNF'd, and that is Devotion by Hannah Kent. I actually read about 3/4 of the book, so I read about 300 pages. I thought I was going to like this, firstly because I loved Burial Rites, which was Hannah Kent's debut novel, which I read many years ago. But secondly, the reviews that I've heard of Devotion just made me think I was going to really like it. It's historical fiction. I kind of struggled a little bit to connect with the characters. There was a few too many characters for my liking. I struggled to keep track of who is who. I'm not that big a fan of books set at sea, and the book takes a certain turn partway through the story, which I didn't really love. The reason why I finally DNF'd it was because I put it to one side for I think 2 days at the most to read something else. And then when I went back to it, I couldn't remember what was going on or who was who. So I DNF'd it. Okay, next, Women's Prize long list. I DNF The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley Heller. I think I read 24 pages of this. The reason I DNF'd it was because there is something which is mentioned. It happens off page. It's something that has happened in the past and is referenced. And it just made me not want to read on. Now, I don't know if that was ever going to be mentioned again. I don't know if that was going to be in any way a significant part of the story. Quite possibly not, but it was just something that I really did not want to read. So I DNF'd it. Next is a book that I was really looking forward to reading, and that's Like Perpetual by Frances Spufford. This was longlisted for last year's Booker Prize. The reason I've only just got around to picking it up is because it's only just been released in paperback. My library has only just got a copy. The reason I was looking forward to this was because it sounded like a really interesting premise. So it's set in the 40s, and there is a bomb and lots of people die, including a load of children. And the book then, as I understand, imagines the life that each of those children could have had. Which sounds really interesting, but I just was kind of bored, which was a shame. Next, back to the Women's Prize long list. This one I am quite surprised about. It's The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. Surprised because I really liked 10 minutes 38 seconds in This Strange World when I read that 2 or 3 years ago. And The Island of Missing Trees, it got off to a really good start for me. So we have a couple of different sort of timelines and perspectives. So we have, I think the girl's called Ada. She's a teenager living in London. Her parents are originally from Cyprus. I think one is Greek Cypriot and one's Turkish Cypriot. And so we do get flashbacks to them when they're meeting in Cyprus. And then we have this other perspective from a fig tree. So this fig tree, Ada's parents have brought from Cyprus to, I think it's London where they're living. And so parts of the book are narrated by the fig tree, which, to start with, I thought this is quite interesting. This is quite novel, you know. But very quickly, that fig tree got very annoying. And I felt like the fig tree was hitting me over the head with its metaphors, which were not subtle. And it really, really annoyed me. And I just couldn't carry on reading it, which is a shame. Because, you know, Elif Shafak is clearly a brilliant writer. She can craft a sentence. But me and that fig tree were just not getting on. Next, some more women's long list. Sorrow and Bliss by Megan Mason. How much did I read? About 70 pages, I think. So the main reason I DNF'd it was because I was bored. I think a lot of it was the main character telling her life story, how she met her first husband. It's just it was just quite a boring style, I thought. And also, well, the main character has some mental health issues, and I was getting glimpses that, not that there was anything wrong with how it was told from what I read, but just I thought it might not be something I wanted to read. So, there's only 2 more left. Next is More Than I Love My Life by David Grossman. I got this out the library because it's on the International Booker long list. And it's the only one on the long list that my library had a copy of, so I thought I should check it out. I didn't get very far into it, I just wasn't feeling it. There was something about the voice or the way it was written that I just wasn't connecting with, I think. And then the final one on this list is The Key in the Lock by Beth Underdown, which is a recently released sort of gothic mystery. I read at least 100 pages, I think. It's sort of compared to Daphne du Maurier, and it's definitely derivative of Daphne du Maurier. And it was okay, but I just thought it wasn't great. I wasn't that interested in the mystery elements of it, so I DNF'd it. So those are all my DNFs of the year so far. A few little surprises there. Yeah, there we go. Let me know, what books have you DNF'd so far this year? Have you DNF'd as many as I have? What's your DNF rate? I would be very interested to know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you all again very soon. Bye.